For centuries, humanity has been entirely obsessed with the allure of the unknown. We chase ghosts hidden deep within the darkest corners of the earth. El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, a mythical utopia that never actually existed, yet it effortlessly commanded the minds and souls of powerful kings. The absolute obsession for its endless riches consumed brave explorers and ultimately destroyed entire ancient civilizations in a terrifying wave of greed and blood. They willingly traded their lives for whispered legends, blindly marching into a brutal, unforgiving green hell from which very few men ever returned alive. But beneath the suffocating mud and the endless vines of the Amazon, a frightening, undeniable truth was quietly waiting to be discovered by modern science. The Amazon rainforest is a massive, impenetrable fortress of nature. For generations, historians firmly believed its poor soil could never support a complex, advanced civilization. Yet men like Percy Fawcett sacrificed everything to find the lost city of Z. He walked into the deep jungle and simply vanished without a trace. 100 years later, modern technology pierced the canopy. Armed with advanced LiDAR lasers, archaeologists scanned the jungle from the sky, stripping away the trees. What they found absolutely shocked the scientific world. Hidden entirely in plain sight were the massive, undeniable remains of sprawling, interconnected, ancient megacities. There was no mythical gold, but there was something far more valuable. Evidence of millions of people living in harmony with the most dangerous environment on Earth. So where did they all go? The answer is tragically simple. The European conquerors brought invisible weapons far deadlier than any steel sword. Devastating plagues of smallpox and measles swept through the trade routes faster than the explorers themselves, wiping out up to 90% of the native population. Without humans to maintain the sprawling cities, the aggressive, unstoppable jungle immediately took the land back, erasing massive empires in just a few decades. The survivors were forced to scatter, devolving into small nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes just to stay alive in the ruins of their own grand civilization. The jungle swallowed its secrets whole. But the Amazon isn't the only place where history vanishes. Far to the north, an even darker mystery was waiting. In the late 16th century, the English crown desperately sought to establish a permanent foothold in the mysterious, untamed wilderness of the New World. They sent a brave group of men, women, and children across the brutal Atlantic to settle on the isolated, heavily forested island of Roanoke. Life was an immediate, terrifying struggle. The dense pines offered no food, the winter was closing in rapidly, and the colonists were completely unprepared. Facing absolute starvation in the freezing cold, their governor, John White, made a desperate decision to sail back to England for vital, life-saving supplies. He left behind 115 terrified souls, promising to return as quickly as the ocean winds would physically allow a wooden ship. But a massive, catastrophic war with Spain and terrifying ocean storms trapped him in Europe, delaying his desperate return for 3 agonizing, endless years. When John White finally stepped back onto the foggy, silent shores of Roanoke Island, his blood ran cold. The beach was completely, terrifyingly empty. He walked slowly through the center of the settlement. There were no bodies, no signs of a violent struggle, and absolutely no survivors anywhere. The wooden cabins were quietly rotting away, personal belongings were left abandoned in the dirt, and the silence of the forest was absolutely deafening. The only clue left behind in the entire settlement was a single ominous word violently carved deep in the bark of a dark pine: CROATOAN. Did they peacefully assimilate with the local Native American tribes just to survive the brutal winters, or were they silently dragged into the dark woods? Heavy wooden chests belonging to the governor had been violently smashed open and looted, their precious contents scattered carelessly across the freezing, wet sand.
Before they could search the nearby islands, a massive, terrifying hurricane violently forced the rescue ships to abandon the search and flee for their lives. The lost colony of Roanoke simply vanished into the thick, impenetrable coastal fog, becoming the oldest and darkest unsolved mystery in American history. But history proves that moisture and fog aren't the only things that can swallow a civilization. Sometimes the most terrifying killer is the burning sun.
Deep in the scorching, unforgiving red rock deserts of the American Southwest, a brilliant indigenous civilization managed to conquer the absolute harshest environment on Earth. The ancestral Puebloans, also known as the Anasazi, were master architects. They built massive, sacred stone structures perfectly aligned with the complex celestial movements. Driven by a deep spiritual connection to the earth, they constructed sprawling, multi-story cities directly into the sheer, terrifying faces of massive desert cliffs. For centuries, they thrived in this brutal landscape, farming corn in the arid valleys and crafting incredibly beautiful, highly detailed silver and turquoise jewelry. Their crowning achievement was Chaco Canyon, an absolutely massive, sprawling stone metropolis in the middle of a barren wasteland that housed thousands of people. It was a vibrant, deeply interconnected society, a sprawling network of ancient trade roads connected distant communities across the harsh, unforgiving desert floor. But around the 12th century, the climate violently turned against them. A catastrophic multi-decade mega-drought completely destroyed their fragile, carefully engineered agricultural system. The life-giving rain simply stopped falling. The reservoirs dried up into cracked mud, the corn withered, and the once thriving canyons descended into pure, terrifying starvation. Desperate shamans performed endless, frantic rain dances in their dark kivas, begging the silent sky for salvation, but the merciless sun just kept burning. Then the unimaginable happened. Entire massive stone cities were suddenly and completely abandoned. Thousands of beautiful pottery pieces were left perfectly intact on the shelves. There were no signs of a massive invading army. It was a panicked, sudden exodus. The people simply packed what they could carry and completely vanished. The terrifying reality of starvation had fractured their peaceful society. Recent archaeological discoveries revealed dark, disturbing evidence of extreme violence and desperate cannibalism. The brutal desert winds eventually buried the empty stone cities in thick red dust. The Anasazi didn't just move, their entire complex civilization fundamentally collapsed. Yet the collapse of an empire doesn't only happen in dry, barren wastelands. Sometimes a civilization can be choked to death by its own massive success. Halfway across the world, completely hidden beneath the suffocating canopy of the Southeast Asian jungle, lies the rotting corpse of an unimaginable ancient superpower. At its absolute peak, the Khmer Empire was the undisputed master of Southeast Asia. Their capital, Angkor, was the largest pre-industrial city in the world. It was a sprawling, magnificent metropolis of over 1 million people, radiating out from the awe-inspiring massive stone temple complex known today as Angkor Wat. The absolute secret to their immense power was water. They engineered a mind-bending massive network of giant artificial lakes and canals to control the monsoons. Their divine kings commanded absolute obedience, building endless, breathtaking stone monuments covered in thousands of intricate, painstakingly carved depictions of ancient gods. Modern LiDAR laser scanning has finally revealed the terrifying true scale of Angkor. It was a hyper-connected, sprawling urban grid larger than modern-day Los Angeles. But their greatest strength eventually became their fatal weakness. The massive, deeply complex water management system was incredibly fragile and entirely dependent on predictable weather. Decades of severe, crippling droughts were suddenly followed by terrifying, apocalyptic monsoon floods that violently ripped through the city, completely destroying the stone dams. The entire highly engineered infrastructure fundamentally broke down. The massive artificial lakes dried up, the crops failed, and the starving population began to violently riot. The glorious kings lost their divine mandate. Over several decades, the massive population slowly and silently abandoned the sprawling stone city, walking away into the darkness. Without millions of hands to constantly maintain the fragile infrastructure, the aggressive, unstoppable jungle immediately rushed in to completely devour the magnificent, empty metropolis. When European explorers finally stumbled upon the massive stone faces in the 19th century, they couldn't believe humans had built something so incredibly vast. The dark, crumbling stone corridors were completely silent, inhabited only by millions of bats and the terrifying overgrown roots of massive, ancient banyan trees. The Khmer Empire is a chilling, undeniable warning. They built a highly complex, interconnected society that simply became too massive and too fragile to survive nature's wrath. It is the ultimate proof that no matter how technologically advanced or powerful a civilization becomes, the slow, relentless power of nature always wins in the end. And while the ghosts of the past sleep quietly beneath the jungle vines, there is one lost tribe that refuses to become another faded memory of history.
Deep in the dark, isolated waters of the Indian Ocean lies North Sentinel Island, a tiny, pristine fortress of dense jungle surrounded by treacherous coral reefs. This isolated, heavily forested island is home to the most dangerous and uncontacted tribe left on the entire planet. They have survived completely alone for thousands of years. They fiercely, violently reject the modern world. Any helicopter or boat that approaches their white sandy shores is immediately met with a terrifying barrage of arrows. The Sentinelese warriors stand firmly on the beach, fiercely guarding their ancient way of life from a hyper-connected, digital world they absolutely do not want. Their arrows are tipped with scavenged, rusted metal from shipwrecks, a deeply ironic twist where they use the rotting garbage of our modern civilization as weapons against us. A massive, rusting commercial freighter lies stranded on their reef, a powerful, undeniable symbol of modern failure, slowly being completely devoured by the primitive ocean. They are the ultimate survivors, a tiny, isolated spark of ancient human life, completely disconnected from the massive, fragile digital grid that controls our everyday existence. Which brings us to the ultimate, terrifying question. Look at the massive, chaotic, sprawling neon grids of our own hyper-connected, overpopulated modern megacities today. We are a deeply disconnected tribe, completely dependent on complex global supply chains, fragile internet cables, and an entirely debt-based, entirely artificial modern financial system. If our massive, highly complex digital infrastructure suddenly collapsed tomorrow, how many of us would actually survive the first brutal, terrifying winter without electricity? Will our massive, hyper-modern glass and steel skyscrapers eventually become the overgrown, rotting ruins of tomorrow, just like the abandoned stone temples of Angkor? Will future civilizations look at our crumbling, rusted concrete bridges and wonder how such a powerful, globalized society could suddenly and violently vanish into the dust? History is completely ruthless, and the cycle of human civilization is an undeniable, repeating loop of magnificent rise, fatal overextension, and terrifying complete collapse. Perhaps the Sentinelese tribe isn't lost at all. Maybe, by violently isolating themselves from our modern greed, they are the only ones who are truly safe. The cycle of history is absolutely ruthless, and as the dust settles over our modern empires, we must ask, who will be the next lost tribe?